To everything there is a season. When I behold the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast established, what is man that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man that thou thinkest of him? Psalm chapter 8, verse 4 and 5. It's possible that in ages past there was a common intimacy with it with the night, even if this has long since been lost to us in modern times. I am not so sure. To be outside alone on the clear and moonless night, far from any lights, far from any trees, and looking up at the sky is not an ordinary thing. I am skeptical that it ever was. No, I don't believe that we ever really noticed the stars except in those rare moments when the possibility of being seen coincides with our openness to see them. But if you catch them in their splendor, glimmering across the breeze night air like icy drops of cosmic fire, then you have no choice except to stop and notice them. Then engulf your vision fully. Then fold your thoughts up whole, and there you stand beneath them, feeling suddenly utterly exposed. Because if you can see the stars that clearly, might not they, then see you too. Thus, when David sang his psalm, gazing up at the sky in wonder, it wasn't the contents of night which moved him, it was his astonishment that just as he was contemplating the universe, so too the universe, or rather its creator, was contemplating him right back. This perception of a mutual regard between man and the cosmos has, from our earliest beginnings, animated humanity's efforts to understand the world and our place within it. Modern science began from studying the heavens. In this sense, we can say that, yes, the stars really have communicated to us many profound truths about the nature of things. The bigger question isn't whether the universe is speaking, but is that how far we can ever hope to comprehend what it might be saying. Because for all the progress that's been made in deciphering the book of nature, what what expectation can there be that human can will ever manage more than a thin and incomplete translation? The language of the cosmos is simply not our native tongue. And if ever we wanted a reminder of the mismatch between the world as it is and the world as it is possessed through the filters of our minds, all we need to do is look up at the stars. The strangeness of seeing kick on the clear, dark night. How many stars can be seen in the sky? 1,000, 1,000,000, 1,000,000,000. If you like me, you may think 1,000,000 sounds high, but it's probably at least in the ballpark. Actually, in the modern, high-precision Hipparcos star catalog, there are only about 5,044 stars that have a visual magnitude of 6 or less. Thus, the value generally considered to be the limit of what's visible with the naked eye. Since at any given moment, roughly half of these are hidden below the horizon, seeing a couple thousand stars in the sky at any one time is as good as it gets, ever, even on a perfectly pristine night. Does this seem like a surprisingly low number to you? It did to me. So consider this our first hint, courtesy of the stars, that our natural ability to gauge large numbers is not necessarily to be trusted without question. Now, a few thousand may sound like a small number, especially when talking about stars, but it would still be very difficult, if not impossible, to get a mental picture of the heavens that consist of these several thousand stars guide individually. Yet, this bewildering chaos of darkness and light is immediately converted into a more intelligible map of the sky simply by grouping the stars into constellations. The specific shapes of the constellations may be arbitrary, but the tendency to cluster the stars this way can be found across the various stargazing cultures. The stars that make up the constellation Ursa Major, for example, have been seen as a bear and a deeper, a wagon, a plug, and an ox leg, to list just a few of its varied personae. Quite clearly, our brains have become exquisitely tuned to recognize the uh, shape of people, animals, and other objects meaningful to our daily lives. And when what occupies our field of view divides an indiscernible pattern, we tend to hoist these same shapes onto otherwise amorphous scenes, such as cloudscapes, rock formations, or the stars in the sky. Does the stone or cup in figure 1-1A look like a human head to you? If so, then your mind has performed a remarkable act of association, one which emphasizes that objects lose outlines with completely discounting other information such as size, texture, color, and situation context. Rock formations like this one, just like the constellations above, are good indicators that we rarely perceive the world in a perfectly straightforward way. Interestingly, a very similar phenomenon occurs in computer vision applications. It's an impressive technological feat to coax a computer to recognize a class of visual objects, say for example dogs, within a larger collection of images. But once you succeed in doing this, it's just as hard, if not harder, to extend the algorithm from vastly seeing dogs everywhere. Figure 1-1B, for instance, used an algorithm called Deep Dream, originally developed by Google in 2015, to show what a computer vision application trained to recognize dogs sees when looking at a photograph of clothes. The composite images generated by Deep Dream are sometimes illuminating, occasionally beautiful, but mostly just delightfully bizarre. Yet what these images do reveal is that a computer that has been taught to see faces in animals like we do, namely by emphasizing outlines above everything else, will tend to see faces and animals in the class just like we do too. It suggests not surprisingly that our peculiarly human way of seeing the world is probably inseparable from our peculiarly human ways of misconstruing what we see. Of course, the fact that the constellations have traditionally taken on the rowdy shapes of beasts and demigods does not mean that anyone has ever suggested that the sky is infested with lumbering space spears or interstellar scorpions. But the constellations do illustrate nicely that there is a limit to number of checks that human mind can handle individually before it tends to impose an additional layer of abstraction. For most people, it's simply more convenient, one might even say more human, to view the night sky not as the disposition of several thousand stars, but instead as the disposition of just several dozen constellations. In general, when the numbers of distinct objects in a system is reduced from thousands to dozens, our minds can begin to develop basic familiarity, identify structures, and examine how parts they relate to the whole. We can even take those parts and craft that higher and more human layer of abstraction and narrative story. As an extreme case, consider that nearly 10% of the night sky played to can be accounted for by retelling just one single legend, that of a hero, the constellation Perseus, who slays a monster filled for her demon eye, the star Algol, which could turn any living creature to stone. This hero then returns to rescue a beautiful princess. The constellation Andromeda, chained to a rock by her parents, the constellations Cepheus and Cassiopeia, as a sacrifice to a giant sea monster, the constellation Cetus. All the same, our propensity to group stars into constellations and constellations into stories can hardly be said to derive from the actual arrangement of the stars themselves. In fact, to a remarkable degree, the distribution of stars in the sky is completely random. Figure 1.2, for example, shows X star maps depicting a roughly equal area of sky. For snippets containing famous constellations, and the other foresaw an alternated night where all the brightest stars of our sky have been repositioned to entirely at random. Can you tell which four are real and which four are random? Can you tell which four are real and which four are random? I'll reveal the correct answers in the next section. Keeping count. For millennia, the stars have been our teachers in how to extract information from vast and unruly clumps of seemingly incoherent data. And if the stars have shown us there are peculiarities in how our minds process quantities that are very large or that exhibit randomness, this does not mean that we are unable to learn anything about systems that are large or random or both. Fortunately, our brains are capable of a trick or two that allows us to compensate, at least somewhat, for our occasionally skewed first impressions of things. For the most part, these tricks rely on nothing more than our innate ability to count. As an example of what can be learned simply through careful counting, take another look at figure 1.2. The four images depicting a genuine representation of the night sky are B. Taurus and Auriga, D. Leo, E. Scorpius, and F. Cygnus. If you were brave enough to attempt to sort them, then your score, which is the number of star maps you correctly identify as being genuine, will be either 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 for all but the most seasoned stargazers. However, it should be pretty tough to pick out all four legitimate maps. How tough? Well, your chances getting any given score just by guessing are presented in table 1.1. Oftentimes, seeing the 12 numbers of how likely or unlikely it is for a particular event to occur can be counterintuitive, if not downright surprising. The speaking tree of the four genuine star maps seem impressive. Table 1.1 indicates that it's no more remarkable than flipping a coin twice in a row and getting heads both times. In other words, not remarkable at all. A sorting game like Figure 1.2 can be extremely useful when there's a decision to be made. For instance, if we want to determine whether you're as good at recognizing constellations as you claim to be under circumstances where other information may be hard to come by. In fact, our star map challenge turns out to be an example of what's called a statistical inference test, a carefully designed experiment that uses knowledge of the laws of probability to marshal evidence for answering a question in an informed way. More specifically, I've arranged Figure 1.2 to mimic one of the most famous of all statistical inference tests, the so-called lady testing T experiment. Its format was originally devised by Ronald A. Fisher, one of the titans of the 20th century statistics, when a colleague of his insisted that she could tell whether her teacup had been prepared with tea first and then milk, or milk first then tea. Statistics law has it that C easily sorted the teacups presented in random order into their correct groupings of four, thereby winning from Fisher a grudging acknowledgement of her exceptional tea-tasting talent. Today, statistical inference tests are used widely throughout science and industry, from measuring the effectiveness of new medical procedures to identifying which website features generate the most clicks, even to assuring the consistency of beer from one bottle to the next. So long as you have numerical data, this test can be applied without any contextual knowledge whatsoever, since numbers are the only things that go in and numbers are the only things that come out. This feature makes them especially useful in many fast-moving fields of research, including almost any ever-rising investigation into human or social trends, where there are few, if any, established theories on which to rely. In this scenario, statistical tests may be the only way to gain any insight into what's going on. Yet, the trade-off of drawing conclusions from purely numerical results untethered to anything more solid than statistics is that it's deceptively easy to misinterpret the significance of a rare outcome. The temptation to ascribe a deeper meaning to unlikely event, to insist that some seemingly incredible coincidence couldn't possibly be the result of chance alone, can be extremely hard to resist, especially if it supports an interpretation we deeply want to believe is true. What's rare is a relative notion. If a process is repeated enough times, otherwise rare events are almost guaranteed to occur, and this can be very misleading if we are not also keeping a tally of every time something rare does not occur. Referring back to our star map example, it turns out that there are 70 ways to sort the 8 images into 2 groups of 4. There is a famous mathematical formula for this. The number of ways to make a group containing key items from a larger set of n items, an operation called a choose key, is equal to. The exclamation points here stand for the factorial operation. For example, 4 factorial reads 4 factorial is equal to 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 equals 24. Out of the 8 choose 4 70 ways to sort the star maps, only one correctly assigns every image to its proper group. The probability of choosing this sorting just by guessing is, therefore, 1 out of 70, or about 1.4%. This result may meet our threshold for being called statistically significant. That is, witnessing this outcome, which expected to happen by chance only 1.4% of the time, may be deemed sufficiently improbable that we conclude instead that it is more likely to have arisen for some other reason. Perhaps we'll take this result as evidence for a natural knowledge of the stars. But the risk here is that while an expert stargazer can be expected to sort the 4 genuine and 4 fake star maps correctly sorting all of the star maps doesn't guarantee any stargazing expertise whatsoever. In fact, the only thing this test does guarantee is that among all the people who try to sort these images using nothing more than dumb luck, 1 out of 70 can be expected to guess them all exactly right. Thus, through sheer force of numbers, the unlikely outcome of someone labeling each image correctly is not just possible, it's practically inevitable. Ups and downs. Statistical inference tests provide a powerful tool for interrogating the behaviors of an otherwise inscrutable system. For a proper count of astrology, they are absolutely indispensable because we are searching for something extraordinary. We don't want to be deceived by chance occurrences, which the laws of probability sees are predictably ordinary. This isn't always easy to do. The X-star maps of Figure 1.2 generated a universe of possibilities limited to just 70 outcomes. Yet the implications of even this small system require a fair amount of nuance to convey. So what happens when the number of possibilities becomes much larger? Suffice it to say, with astrology this predicament gets very sticky very quickly. Astrology has just a few basic species, 7 planets, 12 signs of the zodiac, and 12 houses of heaven. But together, these can be combined in an almost infinite number of ways. The chance that any one celestial configuration will occur is fantastically unlikely, and yet the heavens are graced by one of these fantastically unlikely configurations at every instant in time, including right now. Just think how incredible it is for the planets to have entered into such a unique alignment, for at the exact moment you find yourself reading a book about astrology. A mere coincidence? As with our star map is simple, it's not possible to gauge the significance of any one outcome unless we are prepared to examine it in the context of all possible outcomes. For astrological cases in general, then the enormous number of potential configurations means we had better buckle in for some pretty enormous calculations. Astrology's ability to generate this seeing array of possibilities from just a few simple rules is a quality it shares with many of the world's most popular pastimes like chess, sudoku, and poker. As with any good game, the basic operations of astrology are easy enough to grasp after just a few explanations, but to execute those operations in full is an enormous and occasionally impossible challenge. This light quality means that astrology can be enjoyed as a few minutes diversion, a lifelong obsession, or anything in between. However, astrology possesses one fundamental feature that sets it apart from any mere game: its intimate connection with the passage of time. Through the risings and settings, the cycles and orbits, the stars and planets trace out patterns in time. These patterns unfold over intervals ranging from mere minutes to tens of thousands of years, and no two cycles, however similar, are ever exactly the same. This means that each astrological moment is at once both unique and yet always reminiscent of countless earlier moments in time, and each sequence of such moments, though never repeated, contains the echoes of countless earlier sequences played three. Previously, we pointed to the constellations as an example of how our minds impose familiar patterns onto otherwise disorganized visual scenes. The merest hint of a visible outline was all our brains needed to suggest an association, however bizarre or unlikely. When confronted with disorganization events in time, this impulse remains exactly the same. Our minds still insist on imposing a familiar pattern, although a pattern not in space but in time. And all our minds need to suggest an association, however implausible, is the merest hint that one sequence of events unfolded at roughly the same time and with roughly the same rhythm as another. Astrology's reliance on time, its deep structure of endlessly overlapping yet never identical cycles, allows it to mirror the ups and downs of our lives in an eerily convincing way. Astrology can therefore plausibly combine two powerful human tendencies: our compulsion to find connections in everything, in and our irrepressible fascination with ourselves into a recipe for some exhilaratingly potent brain candy. Or, to put it another way, we humans are pattern matching animals, and astrology is the universe's grandest pattern matching game. This combination, I believe, and as this book will explore, is what has kept astrology captivating and fertile in spite of every effort to eradicate it. Acknowledging this and recognizing some of the patterns that characterize our own pattern matching tendencies is hardly without relevance in a world that puts even more stock in the ability to pick out just the right patterns from all the information around us. Astrology offers us an outlet for these impulses. It provides an almost totally uninhibited template for linking the vast number of possible states of the solar system with the stories that matter most in our lives: love, money, power, and the true identities of who we really are. But no matter how complicated astrology can seem, every one of its operations is, at truth, nothing more than the assertion of a linkage in time. Do you sometimes get the impression that the craziest people you know all have November birthdays? How odd is it then that they each took their first breath when the sun was in Scorpio? Remember those few weeks not long ago when nothing seemed to go your way? Wasn't that right around where Mercury was in retrograde? And couldn't you just work that almost like clockwork? There's some major geopolitical upheaval every 20 years or so. Strangely enough, that's the interval between successive conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn. Time's petty tyrants, the statistic term of art for describing how closely two signals in time rise and fall together in correlation. In a sense, then, what astrology proposes is an elaborate system of correlations between the position of the stars and planets in the sky and various phenomena here on Earth. Some of these correlations have a physical justification, like the connection between the sun's apparent orbit and the seasons of the year, or the passage of the moon and the tides. But beyond these examples, it becomes much less clear which heavenly bodies should be held responsible for the current political landscape, the financial markets, or the love lives of your friends. Astrology addresses this worrisome lack of celestial oversight by bestowing a broad sovereignty over earthly affairs onto entities variously called rulers, despots, lords, or most loftily of all, chronocrators. Chronocator, from chronos, time, and kator, ruler, is a Greek word that translates literally as time ruler or time lord. However, a more accurate translation, and one that happily avoids any confusion with the television show Doctor Who, might be something more like interval lord. This is because chronos refers to a set period of time with a beginning, middle, and end, as opposed to the more free-flowing sense of the English word time. In astrology, a chronocator is the planet, stars, or combination of planets and stars which governs a particular interval of time. There are chronocators for general time periods, such as days and years, and there are also chronocators for personal time periods, such as the first year of your life, the second year of your life, and so on. When Shakespeare mused that all the world's a stage, and one man in his time plays many parts, it was no accident that he insisted the number of these parts was seven. Astrologers had long averred that the sun ages of men from infancy to senility, were governed by the seven classical planets in the sequence from the Moon to Saturn. The astrological role of a chronocator actually maps quite well onto the modern notion of correlation, since in each case there is the existence of a temporal link between two distinct sequences of events. In astrology specifically, one of these sequences will be a list of early events, and the second will track the waxing or waning influence of the relevant celestial chronocator. Of course, the trick has always been to figure out which chronocator is the appropriate one for a given time and scenario. These lines of authority with the heavenly bureaucracy can be exceedingly convoluted, especially since the chronocator of a more immediate period of time may find itself at cross purposes to the chronocator of the longer interval to which it belongs, but expressly because the temporal structure of the solar system is so intricate, there is never a shortage of plausible candidates for any conceivable occasion, so long as your earthly concerns have ups and downs. Some celestial cycle can be found that correlates with it, even if the match is never perfect. Astrological origins of the week. Since the cycles of the stars and planets create patterns over an enormous range of timescales, the temporal jurisdiction of the chronocators likewise extends from the briefest of instants all the way to aeons and eras. At the short end of this range, it was customary to assign planetary rules even to each hour of the day. In fact, it was this practice that gave us the modern week as we know it, as anyone who is familiar with Romance language such as French, Spanish, or Italian knows most of the days of the week are named after planets. For instance, the day of the week in Italian are Domenica, Lunedì, Martedì, Mercoledì, Giovedì, Venerdì, Sabato. Translated literally, those are the Lord's Day, Moon Day, Mars Day, Mercury Day, Jove, Jupiter Day, Venus Day, Sabbath. Norse mythology buffs will recognize that the English week follows the same sequence, whilst the Roman deities that correspond to the planets are swapped for the Germanic equivalents, and allowing for the fact that in the most Roman language, Saturday and Sunday are designated by their Judeo-Christian titles. By merging this list of day names, it's fairly simple to reconstruct the old astrological week, which had become the de facto standard during the Roman Empire, and which serves today as the template for the week in all Western languages. In the astrological week, each of the 7 days was ruled by one of the 7 classical heavenly bodies. From Sunday to Thursday, the chronocators of each day are the Sun, Sunday, the Moon, Monday, Mars, Tuesday, Mercury, Wednesday, Jupiter, Thursday, Venus, Friday, and Saturn, Saturday. These associations are reasonably well known, but what's a bit less familiar is why the days are ordered in such an odd day. In the ancient world, the 7 planets had a fixed sequence based on the perceived distance for the Earth. From the nearest to farthest, the old geocentric ordering was Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Using these numbers, the week that starts on Monday would be represented by the following strange sequence: 1, 5, 2, 6, 3, 7, 4. What is going on? Actually, there's a hidden pattern here, but one that only comes into focus when we realize that it was the hours of the day and not the days of the week that we assign planetary rules in the proper sequence. How this works is shown in table 1.3. Beginning from the first hour of Saturday, each of the 24 hours of the day is assigned to one of the 7 planets in the sequence, from the farthest to nearest. But because 24, the number of hours in a day, is not evenly divisible by 7, the traditional number of planets, the sequence of planets ends abruptly when the 24th hour of Saturday, ruled by Mars. The convention for what happens next was to keep the planetary sequence unbroken and thus to assign the next planet in line. In this example, the Sun to the first hour of the next day, in this example Sunday. Since the chronocata of the first hour of the day was also the chronocata for the entire day, the result is that each day's ruler and hence its name jumps 3 planets ahead for the day before it. Another consequence of the fact that 7 and 24 have no common factors is that 7 is therefore the fewest number of days in which this pattern of assigning every hour of a planet to a planet can be completed. From an astrological perspective, then, a universe of 7 planets and 24-hour days necessarily requires a 7-day week. This little mathematical constraint is actually of tremendous cultural significance because, unlike the other standard calendrical units, the day, the month, the year, the week is not based on a natural cycle. On the contrary, the week is handy expressly because it doesn't require astronomers, mathematicians, or priests to compute when it begins and ends. And yet, since its length is arbitrary, there is no particular reason to have a 7-day week as opposed to some other number. The ancient Egyptian week, for example, was 10 days long, while the Roman week was originally 8 days long. Instead, it was likely only the curious coincidence that two of the 10 discretes within the Roman Empire, astrology and another Eastern upstart named Christianity, both preferred a 7-day week. That this system was able to supplant its 8-day precursor within March 1st. So if previously you scoffed at astrology and its connotations couldn't possibly exert any real influence over your life, think again. It's the planetary house lords who are directly responsible for structuring society's most basic unit of work and social life, the 7-day week. And next time Monday rolls around after a week that seems much too short, you can be totally justified in blaming the planets. The age of Aquarius. In the same way that the moment is too short for astrological governance, connotators are also found at the opposite end of the temporal spectrum, ruling over time periods that are very, very long. The longest of these is the nearly 26,000 year cycle of the precession of the equinoxes. Now, unless you happen to have unusually a bit interest in astronomy, this is probably a pretty unfamiliar term, but precision is absolutely critical for a proper understanding of astrology, so it's not out of place to introduce it right here at the beginning of this book. And besides, I promise it's not nearly as complicated as it sounds. Begin, and with a little imagination, you can convince yourself that even during the daytime here, even during the time there are still stars overhead, it's only the sun's brightness that prevents them from being seen. But if the sun came with a dimmer, a simple turn of the dial, much like a solar eclipse, will render these stars visible again. In fact, we could use the stars closest to the sun at any given moment as a handy way of marketing the sun's position in the sky. Taking this idea further, imagine that whenever a star was sufficiently close to the sun, the star's color turned bright purple and stayed purple for the rest of the year. Over the course of a single day, the sun might change only one or two stars to purple, but over the course of an entire year, the sun will trace out a complete cycle of purple stars in the sky. The astronomical name for this imaginary cycle, purple or otherwise, is the ecliptic. It is called the ecliptic because it plays a role in eclipses, but more on that in chapter 3. The stars along the stars along the ecliptic cycle have traditionally been given a special significance because these are the stars which make contact with the sun during its yearly orbit. Now, surprisingly, the stars constellations made for these stars also have a special significance. They are 12 signs of the zodiac. The zodiac signs can be thought of like tick marks on the face of a clock, but instead of marking the hours of the day, they serve to mark the sun's progress during the year. Each day, the sun advances a little on its yearly orbit along the ecliptic to a new position within one of the zodiac constellations. By tradition, the starting point of the sun's annual orbit is its position on the first day of spring, also called spring equinox. This is the day when the hours of daylight have increased to become exactly equal to the hours of night, not the same. Equinox equal night. The corresponding equinox, when the days are getting shorter, is of course the autumnal equinox, which marks the first day of fall. This year, on the first day of spring, the sun will be positioned within the zone constellation pieces. Next year, after making a complete orbit to the zodiac, the sun position on the first day of spring will again be in the constellation pieces. This year, on the first day of spring, the sun will be positioned within the constellation pieces. Next year, after making a complete orbit to the zodiac, the sun's position on the first day of spring will again be in the constellation pieces. In fact, to an extremely fine approximation, the sun will return to the same spot within pieces on the first day of spring year after year. The sun will return to the same spot within pieces on the first day of spring year after year after year. However, it turns out that this spot which is called vernal point, vernal from Latin word from the Latin word for spring, does not quite stay fixed from one year to the next. It's actually making a very slow revolution around the ecliptic, so slow in fact that it will take nearly 26,000 years to make one complete cycle. This extraordinarily slow motion is called the precession of the equinoxes, and it was first noted by the astronomer Hipparchus around the year 130 BC. When I think about it, I can't help but feel amazed, dumbfounded really, at how early in history that this discovery was made, because in order to recognize this motion, Hipparchus, who seems ancient, to us, had to rely on the accuracy of stargazers who would have seemed unseen even to him. Hipparchus' discovery is thus a humbling example of how science is a collaborative endeavor in time, with each generation building upon the efforts of those who came before. It was a powerful reminder that knowledge from the past However, out of date or obsolete it may seem, or not to be dismissed lightly, since one never knows just when or in what context it may yet prove insightful. Because of the precession of the equinoxes, the sun location on the first day of spring, that is vernal point, will eventually pass through all 12 zodiac constellations, spending about 2,150 years in each. This roughly 2,150-year period divides at the longest temporal unit of astrology and astrological age. Each astrological age takes its name, and so the story goes. It offers characteristics from whichever constellation contains the vernal point at the time. Currently, and for approximately the last 2,000 years, the world has been living in the age of Pisces. Precision is an unusual word, but it means more or less the same thing as position. That is an advance of progression. However, when compared to the sequence of the sun's transit to the zodiac during the year, the vernal point precesses to the zodiac constellations backward: Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Libra, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus, Aries, and then back to Pisces. This because the phenomenon was originally envisioned as the stars preceding slowly ahead of the sun and not the other way around. Consequently, the next astrological age after this one is destined to be the much heralded age of Aquarius. Although the precession of the equinoxes has been noted for more 2,000 years, or to put it another way, since the age of Aries. The idea that the immediate arrival of the age of Aquarius is an event of great cosmic significance is actually quite modern. References to it began bubbling up toward the close of the 19th century, particularly in the North, particularly in the United States, and particularly in the exuberant and often high eccentric religious and highly eccentric religious periodicals circulating widely at the time, and a story that quick took shape along familiar lines. They tell of a Taurian age and the rise of the ancient Baal-worshipping civilizations. How the transit of the equinox into Aries, the ram, presaged God's covenant with Abraham, while the Piscean age of the while the patient age of the last 2,000 years was characterized by the teachings of the Christian Gospels. Indeed, the feast is a long-standing Christian symbol, but it was the pronouncements of an upcoming Aquarian age, expected to be an era of spiritual rebirth, which truly captured people's imaginations and gave a unifying theme to the mystic and transcendental groups which came to be called simply New Age, an indirect though still unmistakable reference to the astrological idea. Over the ages, over the years, there have been many widely varied estimates for when the age of Aquarius will begin or, indeed, has already begun. The best known of this is the song Aquarius from the musical Hair, which links the age of Aquarius to 1960s counterculture. Nevertheless, using modern astronomical algorithms, we can actually determine the dawning of the age of Aquarius a bit more definitely. The tricky part isn't the precision itself, but in self-decision where the constellation Pisces ends and where the constellation Aquarius begins. Based on the official constellation boundaries adopted by the International Astronomical Union in 1930, of which we will have more to say in Chapter 3. The spring equinox so past the border dividing the constellation species at Aquarius around the year 2600. If it insists on waiting until the equinox enters the group of stars that actually form the figure of Aquarius, then we'll need to be patient until at least the year 2900. However, from an astrological point of view, neither of these approaches is entirely satisfactory. In astrology, the zodiac is supposed to serve as an orderly system of coordinates, which is signs often an arc in the sky of exactly 30 degrees such that all the signs constitute the full 360-degree cycle of ecliptic. Unfortunately, there is no clean way to partition the zodiac constellations into 12 equal sections, hence the constellations themselves vary significantly in their breadth. The longest figure extends over 48 degrees of the ecliptic, while the most crumpled Libra covers barely 16 degrees. But while a perfect partition of the zodiac cluster does exist, a best compromise can still be found. This actually straightforward optimization task, one that can be tackled by assigning a penalty whenever a star belonging to one zodiac constellation falls within the boundaries of its neighbor. The optimal boundary lines will then be those which minimize the total penalty. In the algorithm used here, I decided to penalize a star according to the distance it falls outside its boundary and also according to its brightness. Following this approach, the optimal division between Pisces and Aquarius is found to lie almost exactly 3.53 degrees west of today's final point. Or more precisely, it has an ecliptic longitude of minus 3.53 degree in the ICRF G2000.0 reference frame used by astronomers today. The other constellation boundaries then fall in exactly 30-degree increments. Again, it's important to stress that the output of this computation is pretty arbitrary. Even tiny adjustments to how the constellation boundaries are computed can change the overall results by tens or even hundreds of years. Nevertheless, in the spirit of mathematical calculation, we can use this value along with the most modern equations and coefficients for precisionary motion to estimate when the age of Aquarius will arrive. It's simply a matter of determining how long it will take for the equinox to precess 3.53 degrees from its present location. Taking these calculations to an extreme unsupportable and altogether absurd level of exactness, we can compute this moment even to the very day. And so, as a monument to questionably spent leisure time, a Yovel prediction that the age of Aquarius will begin on August 8, 2252. It is a Sunday, by the way, in case you want to plan ahead. Whether on that day peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. Alas, my question were mute. Now, if you are wondering what it means to astrology, what a winter sign like Aquarius will, in a few hundred years, mark the beginning of spring, then you are ahead of the game, because we've gotten quite a bit ahead of ourselves with all these stars of equinoxes and ecliptic and so forth. I present a proper overview of the astronomical concepts needed for astrology in Chapter 3. In the meantime, in Chapter 2, I'll attempt to address two very primary questions: when and where did astrology first arise?